we have a neighborhood that could be the equal of any good suburb, and it has the additional advantage of location, which of course brings with it its own set of issues. My progress through the Neighbourhood Association is almost identical to Valerie Abbott's in that I was a secretary for 5.5 years first. I calculate I wrote about 60 sets of minutes during that time. And then I became president in 1998, and I have been elected 6 times since then. The last time being last October. We get elected every 2 years. I can't say enough about our neighbourhood association system. You already heard a lot of the details. The way it has affected our particular neighbourhood. We are a fairly affluent neighbourhood. The other 2 neighbourhoods in our community are much more affluent. Fairly affluent. We disagree on this. I live there, but we have anything from almost $1 million homes down to $400 a month apartments. We have one of the most diverse neighborhoods that there is, and we have the whole range of ages. We have senior citizen facilities in our neighborhood, races, ages, diversity, you name it, we've got it. We're what I like to call a thriving urban residential neighborhood. The great vast majority of it is residential, and that's what I have dedicated myself to, trying to preserve that residential nature. Because it's so the location is so prime, developers of course eye it greedily and want to convert some of this residential to commercial, and that's where our fight has been. And this, what you heard about being able to have input into zoning issues and liquor license issues, has been absolutely key to our success. Because if it hadn't been for that, I dread to think what our neighborhood might be like today. And one of our cases ended up in the Supreme Court of Alabama, and we were victorious, 5-0. So, but it was a 3-year fight, and I'm sure you all face issues like that. And because of that, one that got away, so to speak, 8 or 9 story condo tower, was completely out of character with our neighborhood. We were able, because of the neighborhood setup and because of all the resources were allocated, thank goodness to Mayor Kincaid doing that originally, we were able to put in place with city blessing a long-range plan for our particular neighborhood. The city allowed us to do that. And we used neighborhood funds. Ultimately, we were able to get a U.S. Department of Transportation grant. And so we were able to use our neighborhood funds, which we had accrued of $25,000 as a match for those funds. And after 4.5 years, it got past City Council last May. And we were able to fight a liquor package store that wanted to come into our neighborhood. If you can just even imagine having a package store in a neighborhood. We were able to fight that successfully too. It's partly because of this structure that you've heard about that I think is so important. The 2 things that have worked best for us have been the money allocation and also the requirement that the zoning and liquor, an interesting combination, ZICA, remember that one, cases that have come before us, we have been able to protect our neighborhood in many, many ways. It has also enabled us to do many other things, such as put nice wrought iron benches down the entire length of the neighborhood, and nice trash cans, and we have got picnic tables in the parks. We've got people who like to drive into our parks, so they have to go over the curb to do it. We have 3 beautiful parks, so we put some, what we call bollards, wrought iron posts, to try and stop them from doing this. We're able to pay for all this kind of stuff. Right now, we're even entering into a partnership with the city, because when they renovated one of our parks a few years ago, and we were able to get that money, by the way, because we had taken the trouble to put a master plan in place for that park ourselves. So you have to be proactive on a lot of these things. But they didn't put a sprinkler system in. And you know these days you get very long, dry summers sometimes, and that was happened to be one of them. So now, when I could fail to get the city, never had enough money to do the sprinkler system. So guess what? Finally I said, if we will pay for the materials, will you do the work? And they said, sure. So now they're doing the work. Now we provided the materials. And the same thing with planting trees. there was one long boulevard we had. We wanted to make an avenue effect. So we said, if we buy the trees and we put them in, will you maintain them? They said, sure. So anyway, that's the kinds of things you can get done. I don't know if you're going to be successful in having the same structure. You may not want the same structure. But I will say that those are some of the things that you can get done in your own neighborhood with whatever type of structure you decide to come up with. And those are some of the things that you can be empowered to be and to do. Thank you very much.
Good morning, and again, thank you very much for allowing me to participate in the program to view your city. I'm Doris Powell. I am the president of the Fountain Heights neighborhood and a community president as well, comprising 5 neighborhoods. A bit of my background. Relocating from the Northeast region back to Birmingham, where my parents were living, and I looked around and I says, what has happened? Because when my parents moved into Fountain Heights in the mid-60s, beautiful neighborhood, craftsman-style homes, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Upon relocating back to the neighborhood, I see apartment buildings, I mean, it's just total devastation, and actually the city's disinvestment in that neighborhood. And I said, this is not going to take place. The neighborhood association, I went to them and I said, why did you allow this to happen, blah, blah, blah. So they come up with all the excuses. So we formed the Concerned Citizens of Fountain Heights, and we lobbied the city and to get the Fountain Heights Neighborhood Revitalization Plan and some other programs with Bill Hillcrest, who is down in your city. And I said, since we had to bring everything back to the neighborhood association, I said, okay, what we're going to run for office in this neighborhood association. So we will cut out that layer of bureaucracy and trying to convince people of whatever we'll do it as a whole, which we were successful. And I think I've been neighborhood president for about 9-10 years now. But in any event, so that's how I became involved, coming from, let's say, an unstructured, if you will. We were structured, but we were not legally recognized by the city, so we came into the neighborhood association. And we've been able to do some good things in rebuilding our neighborhood. As I said, my background from Harlem in New York to Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn to Atlantic City, that neighborhood revitalization, so on to Birmingham. So I was able, I feel, to offer some direction, if you will, in how we perhaps can go. One of the other issues that came up was in 2000 when we did the Fountain Heights Neighborhood Improvement Plan. And I says, okay, fine, we have the plan, now let's start implementing the plan. That's key. You can have a plan, but if it's not being implemented, you're really where you're supposed to start. So I went to the Housing Authority of Birmingham District, because at that time they were applying for a Hope 6 grant in Washington. And I says, well, why can't we also benefit, because we are part of that community? And let's start working to see how we can redevelop from the apartments to get single-family craftsman-style houses back in and build up our home ownership basis to offer some stability because of our location. We were successful in getting 25 new homes built within the area. And let's see, the GSA, General Services Administration, looked at some of the property around our neighborhood in terms of the federal buildings relocating under the federal mandate. We were an urban neighborhood, and that was one of the requirements they had. So we have the FBI, CIA, and this is what you're going to really appreciate. The FBI and the CIA said they didn't want to come there because it was too much crime. And I said, I couldn't believe this. And I says, let me see if I can't meet with them. And can you believe that? But in any event, and then I says, okay, now we have another task to show that we are worthy, that we value your coming, that we are a people with pride. So we started rebuilding with the block watch. Then the next thing I know, the FBI, someone from the precinct called and says, the FBI wants to meet with you. They'll be with your group, rather, you and your group. They'll be here in 2 days. And I'm saying, well, the FBI won't meet. But anyway, the purpose when they came in was to compliment us in terms of a citizen group, not having any law enforcement kind of training, but the pride that we have in our neighborhood to fight crime. In fact, our neighborhood was the first to try the city's nuisance abatement law. We did, you know, and under that law, you don't have to necessarily appear in court to testify, but we did. We showed up to say, this is our neighborhood, and it's not going to go down this way. So again, this investment has begun to come into now a reinvestment in the neighborhood. One of the other projects that we said, let's take it to the next level, because I am a transit advocate. And I work with the Regional Planning Commission on the Transit Citizens Participation Program with the Transit Authority. And it says we have, let's say, 1,400 residents. 17% are transit dependent. Where are the buses? What's the schedule of the buses? And again, we started looking at transit-oriented development because we are one of the major corridors into the city of Birmingham, into other areas there. So we worked on the 16th Street Corridor Program through the Regional Planning Commission. And again, the neighborhood used its 20% match for the Building Communities Grant under the FTA program. So we're working on that project, and we also are now taking another step further because the right-of-way is the city of Birmingham. So he says, we'll do the retaining walls along this corridor, beautifying that so when folks come into the city of Birmingham, using the theme, United for the Good of the City, we did murals on those walls. One of the contractors in the neighborhood did the construction site prep. We went to the Alabama School of Fine Arts, it's also located in our neighborhood, and says, can this be a project for your art students? Building around this theme, United for the Good of the City. Well, another advantage that we have is that the current mayor of the city of Birmingham, the current president of the city council of Birmingham, and the chief of police all grew up in Fountain Heights. So I look to them and say, hey, we need your help. This is your home as well. So help us too. And then we're on the road to that. Now, next step is that we're presenting under the Transportation Enhancement Program through the FTA, a grant through the Regional Planning Commission for rebuilding streetscape enhancement on our 16th Street corridor, no committees and so forth. One of the other, they had the North Highland water tank, which is the Birmingham Waterworks property, and it was just in pretty shape. And my dad, having worked at the Waterworks many, many years ago, I called him up to the general manager and I says, guess what? I says, we are in the process of doing visual enhancement on this corridor. You have the North Highland water tower that is a part of the city of Birmingham skyline. I says, do you want folks looking at that ugly little building, the tank? I says, they came out immediately within 3 or 4 days after my call, hand delivering letters to all of the residents around this stating that we're going to be doing work around here, the noise, blah, blah, blah. It is absolutely beautiful. So it's just a matter of being able to persevere in it and knowing that in your heart that you're doing what's best for the good of the city. That is critically important. And I thank you so very much for allowing me to share.
You can see how as mayor having that energy really helps. At a meeting on yesterday morning, Councilor Abbott, in talking about what it takes for city government to function properly, used the analogy of a three-legged stool. You have to have your elected officials, your politicians. You have to have the community involved. But you also have to have business. And the person I'm about to introduce headed one of the hospitals in the western section of Birmingham. And just to give you an example, they are doing major renovations in terms of expansion, which means more employees and all of that. But they wanted to close a street. The neighborhood voted no. The city council, in looking at everything, approved the street closing. So there is kind of a relationship on this three-legged stool between business, between the elected officials, and the community. And that's what it takes to make it. And so a neighborhood association or a citizen participation program does not have to be hostile to business. It can embrace business, and business can embrace it. As a result of that, I'd like to introduce Charlie Faulkner, who was the CEO of Baptist Hospital there in the western side of Birmingham.